My most terrifying workplace experience involved an encounter with what I believed to be a demonic entity. It was an experience that I'll never forget. This happened a few years ago when I was working overnights as a custodian on a college campus. Working nights in an empty building is creepy by default, but there was something different going on in Building 8. Something unsettling. Something malignant. Starting the very first day after being reassigned to that building, I began having intense nightmares. And these weren't your normal bad dreams. They were unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Night after night of violence and carnage, and they didn't go away when I woke up. They lingered long into my shift each night. A key piece of backstory was my recent divorce. I was only a few months removed from it when I started working there, and that divorce destroyed me, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. I went through a prolonged, dark stretch, and this job was the first step to getting me back on my feet. I liked having a series of tasks to keep me busy each shift. It gave me a sense of purpose and accomplishment. But that all changed when they moved me to Building 8. There was something different about those shifts. A pervasive creepiness that grew as each shift wore on. It was unsettling. I had a coworker that we called the Gentle Giant, whose shift ended halfway through mine. I hated to see him go because once he was gone, I was alone in the building for the rest of the night. At that point, my uneasiness would rapidly intensify, almost like the malignant force knew that I was now alone and would ramp up the psychological oppression. Fragments of the previous night's nightmares would force their way to the surface, and they were horrifying. In each dream, a new murderous, lust-filled chapter unfolded. The dreams would start with me attacking my ex in some violent, rage-filled manner, and then I'd have my way with her in every way possible. Sometimes mutually, sometimes against her will, but always afterward I'd finish her off in some brutal fashion, usually with a blade, but sometimes with my own bare hands. Having a nightmare like that just once is eye-opening enough, but having it night after night is horrific, and it affected me, poisoned me with intrusive thoughts, left me teetering on the verge of real-life violent outbursts. And it goes without saying, but I probably should mention it. That is not who I normally am. I've never been violent toward any women, let alone my ex, and the last time I got into a fight was in middle school. Needless to say, those nightmares were changing me into someone else, and I feared that I was nearing a breaking point. Between the divorce, the sleep deprivation, and whatever was in that building slowly overtaking me, my sanity was teetering on the brink, and something was bound to give. There was another unwanted side effect of those nightmares, and that was me obsessing over my ex all over again. I'd find myself scouring her social media, dwelling on all the ways she'd done me wrong, fixating on her posts with her new boyfriend and becoming increasingly vengeful. My obsession got so bad that one morning, after my shift, I found myself parked outside her apartment, contemplating how easy it would be to make one of those nightmares a reality. I shook off that compulsion and drove away, but it was undeniable that some oppressive force was slowly enveloping my mind, body, and soul. And then came the night of my creepy experience. I was on the back half of my shift on an otherwise typical night. Jared had already left, and once he did, the images from my nightmares began to overwhelm my thoughts. I put on a podcast to distract my mind, and it did help, but the oppressive force intensified. And then I thought I heard something. The sounds of someone shuffling down the hall. I thought maybe Jared had returned, and I went looking for him. As I did, the shuffling sound continued, but I couldn't pinpoint what direction it was coming from. I found doors unlocked, lights left on, but no sign of Jared or anyone else. After looking around, I tried to convince myself that it was just the sounds of the building settling. And then it happened. I heard a cacophony of banging sounds throughout the entire building. I turned around to see the classroom doors of the hallway were all thrown open, close to a dozen of them. These were heavy fire doors and had to be manually opened. My pulse was racing as I stood there alone in the empty hallway. Images from my nightmares flashed through my mind. I turned and ran, and as I did, I heard whispers from every direction, whispers telling me to end her, to punish her. And when I rushed out of Building 8 and ran across the empty parking lot, the whispers seemed to follow, and it felt like they were chasing me. It took me a frustratingly long couple of seconds to retrieve my car keys, but when I finally found them and piled into my car, the whispers slowly receded. I drove out of the parking lot and went straight home, and I never went back to that job. The phone calls from the college began a few hours later and continued steadily for the next few days. I never answered a single one. Eventually, they slowed and then ceased altogether. And just like that, my nightmares stopped. The irritability faded, and I began to feel like my normal self. I found a new job doing admin work, and I got back to living. And then, maybe it was 6 months later, I ran into my old coworker Jared in the parking lot of a strip mall. He was excited to see me, and he immediately asked me what happened that night. I explained the beeping and the doors, and then he asked me about the graffiti. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about, and he pulled out his phone and had me scroll through a series of photos. He explained that in every classroom of that building, something was painstakingly drawn on the whiteboard. Some of the drawings were variations of the same word, while others were complex images that looked like hieroglyphics. The word, written in dozens of different forms and languages, was Asmodeus. Jared explained that this was the name of an ancient Persian demon that predated the Bible and the Talmud. Now, I've never been very religious, so I don't know what to make of all that, but I will say this. Whatever entity lurks inside that building, I hope to never encounter it again.